Os apoios às pequenas empresas e o investimento em novos recursos hospitalares foram apenas alguns dos assuntos abordados numa conversa recente entre a jornalista Teresa Lencastre e Prabmeet Singh Sarkaria. Acompanha a entrevista ao ministro associado das pequenas empresas de Ontário e deputado provincial por Brampton South.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So there are many topics we would like to talk about today. And let's begin by the provincial supports for small businesses. We know that there are many small businesses quite worried, and this is frequently shown in reports and other documents, that they are really worried about the second wave. Many of them say they might not survive this second wave of the pandemic. So my question is, what is the government of Ontario doing for them?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and thank you so much for having me on, Teresa. It's an absolute pleasure to be here to talk with you and all of your viewers as well. We all know that small businesses have faced unprecedented challenges, during this pandemic, and the government really wants to be there to support them, and we're trying to do anything and everything we can. I'll talk about a couple of the measures that we've introduced over the past couple of months. Right off the bat, when the pandemic started, we introduced about $10 billion in immediate cash flow support, whether it's through property tax, WSIB premiums, or provincial taxes owed to the government. After that, we introduced the Commercial Emergency Rent Assistance Program, which would cover up to 75% of rental programs with the federal government, rental lease payments. And now that program is being transitioned into a tenant direct program. So tenants will directly receive supports by the federal government, up to 90% in places like Brampton and Peel right now because of the new additional measures that were put in place. On top of that, we introduced programs like Digital Main Street to help businesses pivot to e-commerce digital platforms, about a $57 million investment there. We also put money into a PPE grant program, so supporting businesses, with under 10 employees to cover the cost of PPE because they've really struggled, and the cash flow has really impacted them quite a bit and quite significantly. So they get to expense up to $1,000 or so in PPE equipment to the government, and that should be launched in the next very shortly, as well as the $300 million support program that was announced for the 28-day period where we see the lockdowns that have just occurred in the city of Toronto, Brampton, Mississauga, and York, and also in Ottawa, and that will cover up to 100% of their property tax payment and 100% of their utility. So there's still lots of supports, a long way to go, but the government is trying to put as many supports forward as possible to help out businesses to the extent possible.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned several supports. How can small businesses apply for these supports? Is it difficult? Is it easy?
So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for businesses to apply to these supports. All you have to do now is go onto ontario.ca/small business, and you will find all of the information that's been consolidated there for your, so any of your viewers can go there. We will keep and continue to provide information through that webpage and website as we go forward over the next couple of weeks to keep businesses updated. And even in the future, if there's anything that is released, we want to centralize it so that one webpage can give you all the information that business owners needs in terms of supports available.
Okay. We know that the government of Ontario wants to make the takeout and delivery of alcohol permanent to help struggling bars, even after the pandemic ends, right? But would you say that the pandemic somehow opened the opportunity for this to happen? I mean, the idea is to turn this possibility permanent even after the pandemic ends. So why didn't you do this before the crisis?
Well, that's a great question. And I think sometimes, when pandemic, occurred, we were looking at different ways where we could support businesses, different ways. And we knew the restaurant industry was hurt really hard. They were getting impacted significantly. So I was talking to a bunch of small business owners in the hospitality and the restaurant side, and they had a lot of inventory, and they wanted to really find ways to increase revenues. And this is an idea that they had pitched. It simply really hadn't been pitched much before that. And so we were able to react very quickly, and we were able to get this into place. The Minister of Finance, the Attorney General of the province were very supportive of this measure, and we implemented almost ASAP. And it's been so successful, and it's helped out some of those businesses so much that they've asked us, and they've been putting a lot of pressure on the government to make sure it's a permanent, and we've committed to making it permanent because we recognize how helpful it has been for those businesses. And so, from our government's perspective, we want to continue to do anything and everything we can. We want to innovate through a regulatory lens to help businesses compete, to help businesses get that money. But we still know that there's so much more work to be done to help them because we're still not out of COVID right now. And we want to make sure we get to a point where everybody's safe and healthy and out and about again.
Yes, you said that we are not out of COVID, and Premier the Ford said recently that there are no plans to ease hot zone restrictions despite the economic impacts they have on small businesses. This statement must be scary for them, right?
It's a very tough time for many of these businesses, and I always try to the government will always try to do as much as in anything we can to give them the support and the money they need to get through it. We're up against, a pandemic and up against a situation. We look all across the world. Today we look at France, we look at Germany. They're all imposing more restrictive lockdown measures than they had to before. We need to ensure that the health and safety of everybody is maintained, that everybody has we have to protect our elderly. We have to protect those that are most vulnerable. And we really have to understand that if we want to keep a strong economic future, that we have to maintain and protect our healthcare currently as well. And if we can protect the health and safety of our people, of our residents of Ontario, then we can ensure that we're going to have a strong health system, a strong economic future as well. When we look at, Ontario and how they have responded to the pandemic in the last 6 months, and we compare to other regions. You can compare to south of the border in the United States and compare what Ontario did. We took some very strict, strong measures, but economically and from a social health perspective, we came out of it much stronger. And we're going to continue to work with not only our medical professionals, but others to ensure that we have a good balance and that we get everybody back on their feet at a time when we can to support not only our businesses, but also the health and safety of the people of this province.
Okay. Toronto City Council has recently approved a measure to extend the city's outdoor dining season throughout the winter months as well. Do you think, in your opinion, that other cities should follow this example?
I think it's gonna be a really cold winter. Winter is cold, but we have to find innovative ways to get people back out, and whether it's supporting our restaurants, getting onto our restaurants, and I think there's different ways that we're able to do that. We saw in the summer when we extended patio bylaws. So many times you'll walk to a restaurant and they're on the curb or on the sidewalk, and people have been really appreciative of governments thinking outside the box to increase patio space to help them be able to survive the pandemic. And so I think we need more creative solutions. So we'll work with all levels of government. We're going to work with all different governments, different people to ensure that nothing is left on the table, and that we support our businesses throughout the pandemic, whether it's through extending heated patios in the winter or other mechanisms that they might pitch the government on. But it's something that we really want to focus on, and something that we think can really help our businesses survive over the winter. Okay.
So regarding another matter, the government of Ontario also announced recently the addition of hospital beds in Peel region and the GTA. Could you tell us a bit more about this investment?
Yeah, so this was an investment made by the government as part of the Fall Preparedness Plan. And the Fall Preparedness Plan really focuses on ensuring that we have the necessary capacity in high growth areas like Peel region, like the GTA. And specifically, it was announced in Brampton, where the William Osler system is going to be getting 87 new beds to fight against the capacity pressures that we face. Now, we all know that there's been a long-standing issue in Brampton in terms of how significant the need for healthcare is here. Many governments have ignored the city of Brampton, but we're trying to change that, and we want to make sure that Brampton gets the fair share of funding that it deserves and it needs. And the other thing that the Premier really committed to that day in Brampton was the second completion of the new hospital for Phase 2 Peel Memorial. And that's so important for the people of Brampton, because right now Peel Memorial does not have any inpatient beds. And so for us to be able to do that, for us to be able to have a Premier that commits to that and getting it built and starting the construction, the building of it as Premier, it's going to be something that is going to be a game changer for the city of Brampton and the people here in the province.
Yes. These are great news for the Portuguese community. As we know, there are lots of Portuguese people living in Brampton. So I've made all of my questions. I don't know if you want to leave a final message to our Portuguese audience.
Well, thank you so much for having me on today. And on behalf of Premier Ford, we really want to thank the Portuguese community who've stepped up during the pandemic and helped and supported businesses, their communities, City of Brampton. Thank you so much for doing everything that you are doing. And, if there's anything that my office can help you with, do not hesitate to reach out as your local representative for Brampton South and the Associate Minister for Small Business and Red Tape Reduction. We're committed to fighting for you and supporting you in any of your needs. And thank you so much, Teresa, so much for having me here today with you. How can people reach you now that you? So you can, yes, of course. So my constituency office is at Ray Lawson and her Ontario. If anybody's familiar with the Ray Lawson Plaza, you can also send me an email, which is prabmeet.sarkaria@pc.ola.org, or you can reach me at my office phone number, which is 905-796-8669. 905-796-8669. Okay, thank you so much, Minister, for that information and for a very interesting talk. Thank you very much for having me.